Hi everyone. Tonight, we move quietly through history, across cold stone passageways, until we arrive at a medieval castle. Its towers are dusted white by winter, snow piling high along the battlements as the wind howls, making the stone seem almost alive. This is not a casual visit. You are entering the private world of kings and queens, at a time when winter turned the simple act of sleeping into a nightly struggle for survival. Picture a vast stone hall. In daylight, it looks powerful and impressive. But once night falls, it transforms into a hollow chamber filled with icy drafts and echoing silence. Without modern heating, you wouldn't last long here. Most people today wouldn't survive even one night. So before we go further, take a second to like the video and subscribe, only if you truly enjoy this content. And feel free to share where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, lower the lights. You step into the royal bedchamber, and the cold strikes immediately, sharp and unavoidable. The walls are thick, yes, but stone holds cold the way a hoarder clings to treasure. Torches flicker, casting a warm glow, yet the heat barely rises above your legs. Even wrapped in heavy furs, the chill slowly works its way into your bones. A royal chamber is meant to represent luxury, but in winter it feels more like a cave. The air smells of damp stone, wool, and lingering smoke that refuses to fade, no matter how many fires are lit. Look upward. The vaulted ceilings stretch high above, designed for power and display rather than comfort. In winter, their beauty feels almost mocking as wind slips through cracks and arrow slits. It's as if the castle itself breathes, releasing cold air onto its rulers. Historians still debate whether builders knowingly sacrificed warmth for defense, or whether insulation simply wasn't a concern for people accustomed to harsh climates. Either way, even a king's wealth could not buy true warmth. At the far end of the room stands the bed, a massive four-poster, so large it resembles a stage. Heavy drapes hang around it like theater curtains, not for show, but for protection. The mattress is thick, packed with feathers, straw, and whatever materials were available. Yet when you press your hand into it, it feels uneven and lumpy. Comfort, by medieval standards, was relative. Compared to peasants sleeping on straw near a hearth, this was luxury. Still, even luxury was cold. Imagine the monarch undressing, servants carefully layering linen and fur. Bedtime was not just routine, it was preparation for the night's cold. A brazier glows nearby, sending thin trails of smoke into the canopy above. The air carries a metallic scent mixed with ash. Fireplaces crackle, but their flames are far too weak to warm a room large enough for footsteps to echo. You pull your cloak tighter and wonder how sleep was even possible. Yet sleep was necessary. Kings and queens were human, just like anyone else. They needed rest to plan wars, sign orders, and endure endless ceremony. So they retreated into beds that functioned like inner fortresses. Curtains were pulled tight to trap body heat. Outside those drapes, the room remained bitterly cold. Inside, if fortune smiled, there was a small pocket of warmth. A well-documented historical detail fits here. Edward III of England, who ruled in the 14th century, owned grand beds layered with multiple quilts and fur coverings. Even so, records show complaints about the cold, reminding us that wealth reduced discomfort but never eliminated it. There were practical quirks as well. Some royals slept with dogs at their feet, not for affection alone, but for warmth. A small lapdog or a sturdy hound could provide more heat than any blanket. Imagine it, a ruler of kingdoms depending on a breathing animal to keep their toes from freezing. As the night deepens, you exhale and see your breath form a pale mist. Frost creeps along the edges of stained glass windows, sketching fine white patterns. You pull back a curtain and look outside. Snow falls softly, endlessly, as if the world itself has gone to sleep. Inside the castle, however, silence never fully arrives. Guards patrol the walls, their boots echoing through stone corridors. Servants tend fires and carry logs. The sounds are muted, but they are constant, a reminder that royalty was never truly alone. Your fingers brush the wooden bed frame, cold to the touch. Even here, among crowns and banners, winter remains an uninvited guest. Comfort feels fragile. Sleep becomes something to be defended against stone, wind, and frost. As you settle deeper into this imagined bed, listening to the wind beyond the curtains, it becomes clear that royalty did not mean freedom from hardship, only the ability to endure it with better coverings. You shift closer to the shuttered wall, where massive stone blocks rise like frozen guards. At first glance, such thickness seems reassuring, but the truth is the opposite. Stone absorbs cold and holds onto it for months. You run your hand along the wall, so cold it almost seems sticky to the skin. Drafts don't enter from just one place. They sneak in through narrow openings, gaps in shutters, and even the mortar between stones. You glance at an arrow slit. By day, it is a clever defensive feature, narrow and tall, allowing archers to fire safely. By night, in winter, it becomes a channel for relentless wind. The shutters are tightly secured, yet a faint whistle slips through, sounding like a sad flute. Each gust rattles the iron fittings, making it easy to imagine lying awake in the dark, waiting for warmth that never arrives. Historians continue to debate whether medieval builders underestimated drafts or simply accepted that castles were designed as fortresses first and homes second. Whatever the reason, the royal family had little option but to endure. To reduce the cold, thick tapestries were hung along the walls. Picture them, vast woven scenes of hunts, saints, and mythical creatures. By day, they displayed wealth and taste. By night, they served a practical purpose, acting as soft barriers against wind and echo. Even so, no tapestry could fully silence the steady breath of winter. You lie back, imagining that sound, a low and constant murmur that seeps into sleep. This brings us to another solid historical fact. In many castles across England and France, tapestries functioned as insulation as much as decoration. Records from the 15th century show monarchs spending huge sums on wall hangings, partly to impress visitors and partly to stay warm. Interestingly, many of these tapestries traveled with the court, rolled up and moved from castle to castle. One can easily imagine the servants struggling under their weight. The shutters themselves also deserve attention. Built from oak or reinforced with iron, they were strong enough to resist storms and attacks. Yet despite their strength, they rarely sealed completely, leaving winter plenty of ways to slip inside. And hard won. Every draft slipping through arrow slits reminded the sleeper that no wall, no matter how thick, could fully block winter. Your attention moves to the centerpiece of the chamber, the bed. It rises above the cold stone floor like a monument, carved with heavy posts reaching toward the ceiling, polished smooth by countless hands. This is more than a place to sleep. It is a symbol of authority. The royal bed functions almost like a room within a room, its curtains thick enough to you imagine the monarch lying awake, listening to the soft clatter as a shutter shifts in its frame with each gust of wind. You wonder whether queens ever asked their attendants to push wool into the cracks. There are scattered references suggesting this happened, though nothing conclusive. Historians still debate whether such small fixes were common or merely rare solutions. Even so, inside those massive beds with their curtains closed, drafts could be reduced for a time. You picture yourself inside, hearing the wind howl against stone walls while the weight of furs presses around your shoulders. It is an odd balance, comfort found within hardship. The wealthier the monarch, the heavier the bedding, the more tapestries, the thicker the shutters. Still, the struggle stayed the same. Castle against winter, ruler against cold air. There is another small detail worth noting. Some rulers ordered reeds or straw packed between stones in especially drafty rooms. It was a rough form of insulation, temporary and untidy, but possibly effective. Imagine the irony of a powerful king relying on bundles of straw jammed into royal walls. Yet necessity ignores rank. As the night grows deeper, you imagine your breath visible in the cold, mixing with the rattle of shutters. Sleep would have been difficult even for a queen. You shift beneath the covers and realize that comfort in a medieval castle was never guaranteed. It was always fragile, negotiated, block light, and trap heat. You step closer, the wooden boards creaking beneath your feet, and suddenly the vast chamber feels less overwhelming. Here, enclosed in wood and fabric, the monarch faced the night. Standard historical accounts tell us that medieval kings and queens slept in four-poster beds so tall that servants used steps to climb onto them. You imagine it now, a mattress layered thickly, so deep that a child could disappear into its folds. The climb itself became part of the routine, attendants watching as their ruler mounted the bed much like mounting a horse. What counted as luxury for royalty often appeared as spectacle to observers. Looking closer, the mattress is nothing like a modern one. Some were filled with feathers, others with wool, and many layered straw beneath softer materials. It was uneven and lumpy, but it represented the best available option. Wealth meant that instead of a single thin layer, monarchs stacked several, turning the bed into a padded barrier. The effect was that you would sink deep into it, almost consumed by the furniture. Yet comfort varied by preference. Some kings reportedly favored firmer straw bases. Others demanded feather beds imported at great expense. Scholars still debate whether personal taste or medical advice guided these choices. Medieval physicians often believed that certain materials helped balance the body's humors. The bed frame itself mattered as well. Thick posts were carved with lions, floral designs, or religious symbols. These details were not purely decorative. They conveyed faith, lineage, and legitimacy. Resting in such a bed was not just sleep, it was a display of rule. Treaties were whispered there, heirs conceived, and sometimes monarchs died within those frames. You begin to realize that these towering beds carried more history than many thrones. Another curious detail appears here. In some cases, royal beds traveled with the monarch. Imagine an entourage transporting not just clothing chests, but dismantled bed frames along muddy roads. The bed became portable authority, rebuilt in each residence as a symbol of continuity. No matter how unfamiliar or drafty the chamber, the monarch slept inside the same familiar wooden structure. Move closer still. The curtains hanging from the canopy are thick, woven from wool, silk, or velvet, dyed in colors reserved for elites. You touch the fabric and feel its weight, heavy enough to muffle voices and block candlelight. Drawn tightly, they sealed out drafts, creating a small pocket of warmth filled with scent. Musty cloth, faint smoke, traces of oils rubbed into the wood. Inside this enclosed space, the king or queen could briefly forget the frost outside. Still, discomforts remained. Without springs, the bed sagged as ropes loosened. Servants had to retighten them beneath the mattress, giving rise to the phrase, "sleep tight." You pause at the thought, a modern expression rooted in servants straining to keep a monarch's spine supported through the night. It must have felt strangely humbling. A ruler commanding armies and lands lying down like a child, dependent on attendants to arrange blankets, smooth furs, and block cold air. Historians continue to debate whether this vulnerability contributed to elaborate bedtime rituals. The prayers, attendants, and ceremonies meant as much to preserve dignity as to provide comfort. You imagine yourself here now, the curtains closing, the posts standing like sentinels. Outside, the castle groans under winter's pressure. Inside, you are wrapped in tradition, authority, and the uneven layers of an oversized mattress. It is impressive, but also deeply human. Even kings and queens ultimately faced the same concern. Would this bed keep them warm through the night? You lower yourself onto the bed, and it nearly swallows you. The first sensation is not softness, but weight. The bedding presses down like stacked layers of history. One quilt, then another, then furs piled so high you wonder whether warmth will come before discomfort. The feeling is both reassuring and heavy. The pressure was intentional. Stillness meant warmth. A practical reality emerges here. Inventories from places like Hampton Court list 7 or 8 layers on a single royal bed during winter. These included feather mattresses, wool blankets, fur throws, and sometimes silk quilts imported from Italy. The quantity signaled wealth, but also functioned as protection against cold. Then come the unusual details. Consider squirrel fur, known as vair. It was a luxury material sewn into patchwork linings for cloaks and bedding. Each piece came from the animal's pale gray belly, stitched into a shimmering pattern. You may associate it with fairy tales, but in early versions of Cinderella, her slipper was made of vair, not glass. Imagine rulers sleeping beneath layers of squirrel fur simply to keep their feet warm. Less fantasy, more practicality. You reach down and notice how uneven the bedding feels. Wool scratches, silk shifts with the slightest movement. The furs carry a faint musky scent, the lingering trace of animals despite careful treatment. You wrinkle your nose, realizing that luxury in the medieval world was rarely clean. Historians continue to debate whether bedding in medieval castles was regularly washed or simply replaced. Washing posed a real risk, since soaking wool and fur could permanently damage them. Some scholars suggest that scented sachets and dried herbs placed between the layers were used less to clean the fabric and more to cover unpleasant smells. Preparing the bed was a careful process handled by servants who spent considerable time arranging each layer. Feather mattresses were fluffed, quilts shaken, linen smoothed, and fur pelts laid with precision so seams did not overlap. You can imagine them working quickly, their breath visible in the freezing air, eager to finish before the monarch arrived. In this setting, the bed was not merely a place to sleep but a carefully arranged setting for the nightly routine. Now you slide beneath the covers. The first layer feels rough, the second presses down with weight, the third is softer but slick, and the fourth feels almost overwhelming. Once the furs are pulled over you, you are enclosed in layers of fabric and hide. Gradually, your body heat forms a small pocket of warmth, and the sharp edge of the cold eases just enough to allow sleep to approach. You think of peasants at the same moment, curled on straw near smoky fires, and suddenly this stack of blankets feels luxurious. Still, the cold never fully disappears. A faint draft brushes your face, reminding you that even many layers cannot fully defeat the chill of stone walls. The monarch pulls the covers tighter, burying nose and chin in fur, trying to disappear into warmth. You may recognize this instinct from your own winter nights, wrapped so deeply only a small opening remains to breathe. In that sense, royal sleep was not so different after all. As you settle in, another detail emerges. Some monarchs were said to sleep nearly upright, supported by pillows. Historians debate whether this posture came from medical advice meant to aid digestion and balance bodily humors, or whether it was simply practical, since lying flat under such heavy bedding could feel suffocating. Either way, it is easy to imagine a king resting upright, crown set aside, chin lowered, surrounded by silk and fur. Power in that moment looked thoroughly bundled. You lie beneath the same imagined layers and notice another aspect of royal life at night: what the monarch wore to bed. Forget modern ideas of light pajamas or simple shirts. Medieval kings and queens dressed for sleep as if preparing for exposure to cold air. Long linen shirts, thick night garments, and fur-lined caps were standard. You imagine the feel of the fabric beneath your fingers: rough, loosely woven, yet durable. The warmth is uneven, but it offers some protection. This is not speculation. In the 15th century, noble nightwear was commonly made from linen, and silk for those who could afford it. These garments were often decorated with embroidery or lace, because appearance mattered even in private spaces. Attendants might witness a queen undressing, and dignity was expected at all times. Then there are the fur-lined nightcaps. Later generations mocked them, but in drafty castles they served a clear purpose. Heat escapes through the head, so monarchs wore caps with ear flaps, functioning like winter headgear for sleep. Picture Henry VIII, known for confidence and authority, settling into bed with a snug cap pulled low. The image is both slightly humorous and deeply human. This layering was not only about comfort. Contemporary medical beliefs warned that cold air could enter the body through open pores during sleep. Being uncovered was thought to invite illness. Historians still debate whether this idea reflected real experiences with cold-related sickness or simply humoral theory guiding behavior. Regardless, night clothing acted as a defense against both drafts and disease. As you shift, the linen clings slightly with sweat. The air remains cold, while the bedding feels stifling. Wool stockings, and sometimes even shoes, completed the outfit. Shoes in bed may sound strange, but these were sturdy house shoes meant to protect feet when stepping onto icy rush mats during the night. One barefoot step on stone could be painfully sharp. There is also a lesser-known detail. Some accounts suggest that certain monarchs, particularly in colder regions, slept wearing fur mittens. Evidence is limited, but a few references exist. Imagine royal hands, accustomed to gestures of command, now tucked into soft gloves as if ready for winter play. Even so, discomfort was unavoidable. The shirt might itch, the socks twist, the cap slide off one ear. Yet without these layers, the cold would take over entirely. Survival outweighed elegance. As the night deepens, the chamber grows still. Wind presses against shutters outside, while inside the monarch shifts beneath layers, dressed almost as if ready to travel. They are never fully exposed, never fully free from winter. It becomes clear that royalty did not sleep as portraits suggest, relaxed and uncovered in soft beds. Instead, they slept armored against the cold, wrapped in fur, heads covered, feet protected, bodies stiff beneath heavy linens. The crown might rest nearby, but winter's weight remained present until morning. The bed curtains are drawn, and the vast chamber shrinks into something smaller, like a tent within a cathedral. You are enclosed not just by fabric, but by careful planning. Every element serves a purpose, holding warmth, dampening sound, and shielding against the relentless cold seeping through stone walls. Running your hand along the inner lining, you notice its thickness, velvet over wool, sometimes quilted for extra insulation. The scent is faintly of dye, beeswax, and human presence, evidence of long use through many winters. Accounts from the 15th and 16th centuries describe these hangings as necessities rather than decoration. In Burgundy, records show that complete sets of bed curtains could cost more than the furniture they surrounded. At night they were pulled tight, secured with cords or weighted edges to block moving air. Within this enclosure, the monarchs slept in what amounted to a controlled environment. Outside the curtains, cold ruled. Inside, warmth gathered from bodies, candlelight, and sometimes the slow glow of a brazier. One unusual detail stands out. Some curtains were woven with scenes of gardens or summer hunts. Imagine lying beneath firs, cold pressing in, yet visually surrounded by flowers, animals, and sunlight. This may have been psychological comfort, or perhaps an ironic contrast, depending on how one felt in the early hours of morning. Experts disagree on how effective these hangings truly were. Some argue that the heavy folds could raise temperatures enough to make stone rooms livable. Others believe they mainly blocked drafts while trapping stale air filled with smoke and moisture. You can imagine the sensation yourself. Breathing inside the enclosure, the air feels warmer, but heavy, carrying dampness and fabric dust. Servants played their part here as well. Before the monarch arrived, attendants inspected every fastening, straightened each fold, and confirmed that the canopy was firmly secured. Imagine the tension if the king stirred in the night, disturbed by the faint movement of a curtain. A single complaint could place a servant's future at risk. Curtains themselves carried political weight, as they provided privacy. Behind them, a ruler could speak in low tones, welcome a favored companion, or conceal illness from watchful eyes. These hangings were more than fabric, they functioned as instruments of authority. Some courts practiced the custom of placing perfumed sachets within the folds. Lavender, rose petals, and dried herbs blended with the dense scent of wool and velvet. The result was an unusual mix of aromas, part medicine chest, part stable, part chapel. Modern sensibilities might recoil, but for medieval sleepers this scent offered comfort. Fragrance was believed to have spiritual and medical value, thought to repel sickness carried by night air. Now picture yourself lying back with the curtains fully drawn. The outer chamber fades away. Drafty windows, icy stone floors, and the echo of guards' footsteps disappear. All that remains is your own breathing, softened by layers of cloth. Candlelight dims into a muted shimmer, like stars blurred by mist. The enclosure feels complete. You occupy a private space, a delicate refuge held together by thread. Yet comfort was never total. Fabric absorbed moisture from breath, spilled wine, and frost forming on the outside. Over time, hangings became heavy and stale. Some were replaced frequently, while others were repaired and reused for decades. Records even show monarchs passing bed curtains down as prized heirlooms. The idea may seem strange, golden crowns are one thing, aging curtains another, but this reflected a reality where warmth meant survival. Inventories from the period reveal that royal households traveled with several sets of hangings, rolled carefully into chests. One winter required thick velvet, another a lighter silk embroidered with hunting scenes. The bed itself had a wardrobe as changeable as royal clothing. This mobility highlights how central the bed was. Wherever the monarch went, the curtains followed, ready to turn any stone chamber into familiar shelter. Pause and imagine pulling those curtains closed. They slide together with a low, weighty sound, cutting you off from the world. You settle back, layers pressing against your body, caps fitted snugly, socks warming your feet. Outside, wind batters the shutters. Inside this fabric enclosure, you feel almost secure. Almost. Because no matter how rich the materials or how thick the furs, the cold remains present, pressing inward, reminding you that winter always finds an opening. This contradiction cannot be avoided. Grandeur existed alongside fragile comfort. A king might sleep beneath gold-embroidered velvet and still wake to see his breath in the air. A queen might rest among rare silks yet shiver beneath her coverings. Luxury did not overcome the cold. It merely bargained with it, purchasing a few uneasy hours of warmth. As you sink further into this image, your thoughts slow, like embers dimming in a brazier. The curtains sway slightly in a faint draft, and the thin line between royal splendor and basic survival becomes clear. To rule in winter was to live within opposites, clothed in authority yet exposed to chill, wrapped in silk yet trembling in darkness. You close your eyes, enclosed in velvet, listening to the muffled world beyond. Even kings and queens had to accept the cold before sleep could come. Then your attention shifts to the glow of fire. Across the chamber, a hearth smolders with stubborn resolve, flames rising briefly before sinking into embers. You move toward it, but the warmth hesitates, unwilling to travel far. Halfway across the room, the cold reclaims you. Castle fireplaces were immense and impressive, with carved stone hoods and heavy mantles, yet their heat rarely matched their appearance. They burned fiercely when first lit, then faded, leaving vast halls as cold as caverns. Household records show servants feeding these fires constantly, hauling thick logs through endless corridors. The cost was immense. Some Scottish accounts describe entire forests consumed during severe winters. The contrast is evident. Kings could command armies, but they could not force fire to warm stone evenly. Another practice emerged in response. Portable braziers, metal bowls filled with hot coals, were sometimes placed near the bed. These iron vessels radiated warmth like small suns. You can imagine them glowing orange, thin smoke curling upward. But sleeping beside one carried risk. Sparks could leap. Ash thickened the air. A single spill could ignite curtains and blankets before anyone noticed. It offered comfort, but also danger, too close to inspire calm. Scholars still debate how effective these methods were. Some argue that fireplaces combined with multiple braziers could raise temperatures enough to make rooms tolerable. Others insist most heat vanished into high ceilings, leaving sleepers little warmer than before. Step close to the flames and your skin tingles. Step back a few paces and the cold returns immediately, like a predator reclaiming territory. One detail often overlooked is smell. Fires fueled by tallow or peat produced sharp smoke that clung to curtains, tapestries, and clothing. Royal garments might carry the scent of burning fuel rather than flowers. Some monarchs chose fragrant woods such as cedar or juniper, imported at great expense, valued for both aroma and status. Burning cedar signaled wealth, the ability to scent the air with every flame. Another unusual method involved heated stones or bricks wrapped in cloth and placed beneath bedding before bedtime. You can picture attendants moving quickly with tongs, slipping warm bricks under the sheets. The warmth faded as the night wore on, but that first touch must have felt remarkable. Now you remain near the fire, listening to its pops and sighs. Shadows stretch and shift across stone walls, forming moving shapes in the dim light. From beneath the curtains, a king or queen would see these flickers and hear the crackle as part of the nightly routine. Was it soothing or unsettling? Records are silent. The answer likely depended on mood, health, or whether the fire felt protective or threatening that night. Imagine lying back in bed as servants enter quietly to tend the flames. You hear iron tools scrape against logs, footsteps soften, fresh wood thuds into place. Sleep was never entirely private. Warmth required effort from others. The monarch rested while attendants worked, a reminder that winter survival was collective even at the highest level. Still, the cold endured. Fires offered what comfort they could, yet by morning frost edged the windows. Tapestries hung damp and stiff. Breath once again clouded the air. Fire was only a visitor in the chamber, never its master. It gave warmth briefly, then yielded to the stone. You lean back, watching the embers fade. Their glow weakens, shadows stretch farther, and the cold slowly returns, ready to take back control. In that instant, it becomes clear that even kings and queens, wrapped in thick furs, surrounded by braziers, with servants tending fires through the night, never truly defeated winter. They only delayed it until morning. The fire settles into a dull half-light, and another presence becomes noticeable, the smell of tallow. Candles stand grouped on iron holders, their flames quivering whenever a draft slips through a crack in the stone. They offer just enough light to read a prayer book or catch sight of the embroidered canopy above, but never enough to banish the darkness. The odor, heavy, waxy, almost oily, lingers in the nose and throat. Tallow, made from animal fat, released a strong scent when burned, mixing with smoke from the hearth. Contemporary accounts remind us that while beeswax candles were known, they were expensive and usually saved for major feasts or church rituals. In private bedchambers, rulers often depended on cheaper tallow unless ceremony required display. Picture a queen falling asleep not to a warm golden glow, but to the dull flicker of smoky tapers. Even within palaces, thrift followed the night. Another curious detail appears in the candlelight. Wicks sometimes crackled or hissed, spitting tiny flecks of hot fat. Servants had to trim them, often using scissor-like tools called snuffers. You can imagine an attendant bending over the king's bed at midnight, cutting a wick while trying not to disturb his sleep. For a moment the room would dim, then return with a steadier flame. This small routine played out night after night, proof that rest itself required constant care. Scholars still debate how much light monarchs preferred while sleeping. Some believe they wanted near total darkness, since too many flames used up oxygen within enclosed bed curtains. Others argue that a faint candle was left burning for comfort, guarding against fears of thieves, spirits, or sudden sickness. You lean back and watch the shadows move, both reassuring and threatening, their shapes turning into faces if you stare long enough. Among the stranger records is the use of scented candles. Some courts experimented with wax mixed with herbs or spices to improve the air. Imagine hints of cinnamon drifting through a frozen chamber, or rose-scented smoke curling along cold stone walls. It may have seemed pleasant at first, but combined with the greasy base of tallow, the result was likely far less refined, a collision of luxury and practicality. Candlelight also shaped how the night was experienced. Flames burned down slowly, shrinking as hours passed, measuring time in a way clocks could not. The steady loss of wax became the room's pulse. You can see it now, the candle bending, wax gathering, the flame thinning until it flickers out. Darkness floods in, heavy and complete, broken only by the faint orange glow of a brazier. How disturbing it must have been to wake in the middle of the night and find half the chamber swallowed by shadow, knowing that candles near curtains were a constant danger. Many castle fires began when an open flame brushed fabric. Servants had to remain alert, moving holders away from hangings and extinguishing wicks before sleep deepened. Even royalty feared fire. Stone walls might endure, but tapestries, furs, and bedding, the very items that kept them warm, were ready fuel. Picture yourself beneath thick covers, curtains drawn. Beyond the fabric, candlelight trembles. You smell fat and smoke, hear an occasional hiss. The flame leans when a draft enters, then steadies again, like a companion breathing nearby. It offers comfort and threat at once, warmth and warning together. Light in the medieval night was never casual. It was delicate, expensive, and hazardous, a privilege balanced on a wick. In this unsteady half-dark, kings and queens slipped into sleep, aware that every inch of candle burned away wealth. Rest came not in silence, but to the rhythm of flame and melting fat. Necessity disguised as luxury. When the last taper went out, only cold and darkness remained. The chamber grows quiet now, except for the soft sound of footsteps you almost miss. A servant approaches the royal bed with practiced care, carrying a long-handled pan filled with glowing embers. The metal creaks as it meets the winter air. This is not for food, but for warmth. The warming pan, both clever and dangerous, was slid between the sheets before the monarch retired. Its lid rattles faintly, and a hint of scorched linen rises where it came too close. Household records show that warming pans and heated bricks were common in noble homes by the late Middle Ages. Servants packed them with coals and hurried to the bed before the heat faded. The purpose was simple: remove the shock of frozen sheets. Imagine the relief of slipping into a bed already warmed by glowing metal. For a king or queen, that short-lived comfort must have felt invaluable, worth the wood and coal consumed to provide it. Yet there was risk. Warming pans sometimes left scorch marks or even sparked small fires. Accounts describe burned bedding, smoke-filled chambers, and servants punished for mistakes. You can picture the terror of realizing the royal bed was nearly set ablaze, the servants' fear rivaling the winter cold. Comfort and disaster were separated by a thin layer of linen. Historians disagree on how commonly such devices were used among the highest ranks. Some argue they were employed every winter night in palaces, while others believe they were reserved for the harshest cold, too demanding to prepare daily. What is certain is that portable warmth was treasured wherever it appeared, since castles resisted even heating. There was also a more personal solution. Servants themselves acted as sources of warmth. At times, attendants climbed into the bed shortly before the monarch, using their own body heat to take the edge off frozen linens. By modern standards this seems degrading, but in terms of survival, it was practical, a living heater dismissed before the ruler arrived. In some courts, favored companions or noble guests might also share the bed, less for intimacy than for warmth. The royal body was rarely alone in its nightly fight against the cold. Picture it. The queen enters her chamber and dismisses most attendants, leaving only two. They lift the heavy curtains, let warm air settle inside, then hurry away once the bed is ready. She lies down, not met by icy sheets, but by the fading warmth of metal or the lingering heat of another body. The relief would have been real, though brief. Within an hour, the chill crept back, demanding more blankets, more closeness, more endurance. One unusual anecdote even claims that certain monarchs had preferred servants known for warming beds perfectly. Their value lay not in loyalty or cleverness, but in skill with glowing coals. Imagine a career depending on whether the king's feet felt comfortably warm. It is absurd, yet deeply human, a reminder that authority rested as much on small comforts as on power. You draw the curtains closed now, shutting out the sight of the servant leaving with the empty pan. The faint scent of smoke still clings to the cloth. You adjust beneath the blankets, thankful for a small pocket of warmth that will soon weaken, forcing you to contend with the cold yet again. Even kings and queens, swathed in silk and squirrel fur, depended on heated pans and watchful servants to ease them into rest. Wealth did not remove the cold. It merely purchased short pauses from it. And as your eyes close, it becomes clear that in a world of stone and ice, survival relied on delicate solutions. Coals resting in a pan, hands smoothing furs, curtains drawn tight. Royal power did not rule the cold. It negotiated with it, night after night. You shift beneath the heavy quilts and sense faint movement nearby. The bed is not a private shelter this evening. It is shared. Today, privacy in sleep feels natural to us. In the Middle Ages, however, the bed was a place of politics as much as rest. Monarchs often shared it not only with spouses, but with nobles, attendants, or visiting dignitaries. Warmth played a role, as more bodies meant retained heat. Yet the custom also reflected rank and loyalty. An invitation beneath the royal canopy marked someone as trusted, favored, and essential. Chronicles record that important guests sometimes slept in the same chamber, even the same bed, as the ruling monarch. This raised no scandal. It was understood as a bonding ritual. Shared blankets could secure alliances as firmly as written treaties. Picture two kings lying side by side, speaking in low voices as embers glow nearby, their quiet words shaping agreements stronger than parchment. The intimacy of the bedchamber became a form of political stagecraft. One notable account describes Edward II of England sleeping with his favorites openly, under the awareness of his court. Whether for warmth, companionship, or reassurance, the royal bed was rarely only a place for sleep. It stood as a symbol of connection. In the same way, queens sometimes slept beside ladies-in-waiting, pressed close to share heat and maintain a sense of safety within vast, echoing rooms. Historians still debate how widespread this practice was across medieval courts. Some believe it was common. Others argue it occurred only during travel, negotiations, or especially harsh winters, when survival outweighed formality. What remains certain is that solitude, as we understand it, was uncommon for royalty. Every breath was observed, every movement noticed. Sleep itself became a communal act shaped by hierarchy. There were lighter customs as well. In some courts, dogs were welcomed into the bedding as companions. Small lapdogs warmed feet, while larger hounds stretched across the lower covers. You can almost feel the weight of a drowsy animal pinning the quilts, its warmth easing frozen toes. A ruler who commanded armies and castles still relied on the simple heat of animals, a scene both modest and oddly tender. Imagine the sounds of such a night. A queen sighs softly. A lady-in-waiting murmurs a prayer. A dog shifts, claws tapping against wood. The great bed creaks with each movement, though the curtains soften the noise, forming a world within a world. You lie awake, aware of others close by, comforted yet perhaps restricted by their presence. There is safety in numbers, but also tension. Does everyone truly sleep, or do some remain awake, watching and listening? One lesser-known detail suggests bed sharing also served as protection against assassination. In unstable courts, monarchs surrounded themselves with loyal companions at night. The reasoning was clear. No attacker could reach the king without crossing witnesses. Warmth, politics, and security were sewn into the same quilt. Still, one wonders how restful such sleep could be. The royal bed was more than furniture. It was a platform for alliances, a shield against cold, and a space of both trust and doubt. You draw yourself deeper beneath the layers, imagining bodies close on either side. The chamber beyond may be frozen, but here, pressed shoulder to shoulder, a fragile warmth remains. It is not private. It is not fully comfortable. Yet in a medieval castle during the harshest winters, this closeness meant survival. The curtains fall once more, and with them comes the peculiar orchestra of the medieval night. At first, you expect silence, but the room quickly denies it. Every sound feels amplified. Wind howls through arrow slits. Wood pops in the hearth. Distant bells toll from a chapel tower. A monarch lying awake would have known these noises well, their rhythm as familiar as a heartbeat. Contemporary accounts note that wind was often the loudest presence in a castle. It moaned through cracks, groaned along battlements, and shook shutters. Lying in the dark, one could hear gusts rise and fall like a living thing circling the walls. Some believed it sounded like spirits or saints whispering warnings. Others simply resented it for stealing sleep. Even now, historians cannot be certain how effective tapestries and shutters were at blocking sound, only that people wrote about noise as often as they complained of cold. Then there were the footsteps. Guards paced the corridors through the night, boots striking stone in steady rhythm. You hear them now, echoes that grow nearer, then fade away again. For a monarch, this cadence could reassure or unsettle. It promised protection, yet also reminded them that danger was never distant. Some rulers demanded extra patrols during winter, when snow dulled sound and made surprise attacks easier. Security, like warmth, was always uncertain. An unusual detail survives in records of night watch songs. Certain guards were required to announce the hour and recite short prayers as they walked their rounds. Imagine the effect. Deep voices breaking the stillness with calls of "Midnight, all is well," or psalms drifting through corridors into the royal bedchamber. Some monarchs found comfort in these chants. Others found them irritating in a night already filled with noise. Closer still, the castle's own inhabitants joined the chorus. Dogs growled softly in the halls. Owls screeched from the rafters. Some records even mention rats, scurrying across rush-covered floors, clearly audible in the quiet hours before dawn. You pull the covers tighter at the thought, reminded that royal status offered no escape from pests. Curtains could block sight, but not always sound. Scholars continue to debate whether such constant noise hindered or helped sleep. Some believe medieval people were accustomed to it, finding reassurance in familiar sounds. Others argue that sleeplessness was common, worsened by drafts and interruptions. Diaries and chronicles suggest both. Some nights passed in deep rest. Others were restless and alert. Now close your eyes and listen. The room breathes with layered sound. Wind hisses. Timber beams creak. Stone cools and cracks softly. A servant coughs faintly in an adjoining chamber. Somewhere, a hinge squeals. This is not silence, but a collage of noises that signal life beyond the bed curtains. A king or queen never slept alone. Not truly, even in stillness. The castle itself murmured and groaned, as if alive, dreaming through the cold. You curl further beneath the quilts, but your thoughts drift toward another discomfort, cleanliness, or rather, its absence. The royal bedchamber may appear magnificent with gilded hangings and carved posts. Yet when it came to hygiene, even kings and queens could not escape the realities of medieval life. Linen sheets were used, yes, but they were cleaned far less often than modern minds would expect. Furs and quilts almost never touched soap and water, as washing could damage their fibers. Instead, scents, dried herbs, and powders were used to hide odors until the mustiness became part of the chamber itself. Household records suggest that in the richest courts, sheets might be changed weekly, though during severe winters this routine often slipped. Washing required hauling water, breaking ice, and drying heavy fabric near smoky hearths. When snow lay deep, the effort felt hardly worth it. A king could command armies, but even he could not command winter. One curious habit appears in several accounts. Sprigs of rosemary or lavender were tucked into bedding to repel lice and fleas. Picture settling into bed and brushing against dry herbs crackling beneath the sheets. The scent might calm the senses or it might irritate the skin, but its role was purely functional. Warm, layered bedding was a perfect refuge for insects, and keeping them away demanded constant effort. Royal flesh, despite its power, was just as tempting to pests as that of a peasant. Historians still debate how severe vermin problems truly were in royal households. Some argue that frequent laundering by large staffs prevented serious infestations. Others believe that even the grandest castles could not escape lice and bedbugs. A few scholars point to the heavy use of herbs and perfumes in royal inventories as proof that the battle was being lost. One almost humorous detail survives in letters describing monarchs complaining of sleepless nights caused by damp bedding or filthy sheets. Imagine the ruler of vast lands lying awake, scratching flea bites while winter winds roared beyond stone walls. In such moments, wealth must have felt meaningless. Then there was the chamber pot, kept nearby or hidden behind a screen. It allowed relief without leaving the warmth of heavy curtains. Still, the smell lingered, mixing with candle smoke and damp wool. Servants removed it in the morning, but during the night the odor hung in the air like an unwanted presence. To modern tastes it sounds unpleasant, but without plumbing, it was unavoidable. Consider also the floors. Rushes mixed with herbs were spread across stone and replaced only a few times each year. In winter, they collected soot, spilled drink, and crumbs, providing both insulation and a breeding ground for insects and mice. The air of the royal bedroom was far from clean. Cold drafts carried earthy smells, softened only by incense burned during prayer. You lie there imagining the roughness of unwashed linen, the weight of musky furs, the faint snap of rosemary beneath your fingers. Sleep was possible, but it required compromise. Cleanliness was relative, comfort uncertain. Kings and queens ruled nations, yet when night fell, They faced the same annoyances as everyone else: itching skin, stale air, and the quiet movement of unseen creatures. The heaviness of the bed, the blend of smoke and herbs, all fade together as your thoughts drift back to the meal that came before sleep. Royals rarely went to bed hungry. Winter evenings often followed lavish feasts held in drafty halls below, where torchlight danced and musicians played while tables sagged under roasted meats. Picture climbing cold stone stairs afterward, stomach full of venison, boar, or swan, washed down with spiced wine. Now you settle into bed, feeling that weight press against your ribs. Under such conditions, rest did not always come easily. Inventories and banquet records show how rich these meals were. Medieval rulers consumed roasted birds, bread thick with butter, and stews heavy with spices imported at great cost. Even in winter, preserved fruits, sugared nuts, and wine warmed with cinnamon or cloves appeared on the table. What was eaten before sleep shaped the night, and royal dreams were often born of excess. An interesting contradiction appears here. Physicians warned against heavy evening meals, claiming they caused nightmares or upset bodily humors. Yet kings and queens, being human, often ignored such advice. After long feasts, they carried fullness into bed. Chroniclers even hint that some rulers complained of indigestion or night sweats, troubles made worse by layers of heavy bedding. The irony is clear: powerful figures undone by their own dinners. Modern scholars still wonder how diet affected medieval sleep. Did rich food, strong drink, and cold rooms produce restless nights more often than peaceful ones? Or were royal bodies simply accustomed to such habits? Evidence remains scattered across medical texts and private notes, leaving us to imagine how a stomach heavy with stew combined with howling winds to shape uneasy dreams. Drink played its role as well. Spiced wine or ale was believed to warm the body against winter cold. You can almost feel the heat spreading through your chest, only to fade as chill returns. For a time, alcohol dulled discomfort, but it also blurred the line between waking and sleep. Dreams grew vivid, sometimes strange. Chronicles mention monarchs reporting visions after feasts, later read as divine signs, though they may have been nothing more than the effects of excess drink. Some courts practiced drinking possets before bed, a thick mixture of hot milk, ale, and spices meant to induce sleep. Warm, heavy, and filling. Imagine drinking it in a freezing chamber, then slipping beneath quilts, drowsy yet unsettled. It might soothe the body or burden the stomach. You see it clearly now: the king adjusting his fur-lined cap, the queen sinking into pillows, both weighed down by food and wine. Their chamber is not silent. Their bodies are not light. Behind drawn curtains, sleep arrives slowly, dense and heavy. Outside, the castle groans in the wind. Inside, dreams take shape, fed by feasts that fill the body but never banish the cold. It becomes clear that royal nights were rarely fully restful. Comfort always came mixed with discomfort, warmth with draughts, luxury with unease, fullness with indigestion. The feast dazzled, but its cost was often paid in broken sleep, marked by turning bodies and muffled sighs. As the night stretches on, ritual takes hold before rest arrives. A monarch did not simply fall into bed. The act of retiring followed ceremony, guided by faith, caution, and order. You hear the quiet voices of attendants reciting prayers as heavy garments are removed and linen prepared. Candlelight softens, incense rises, and the chamber shifts from public space to something sacred. Royal chaplains were often present at bedtime. Records describe priests offering blessings before sleep. The words were simple but carried weight, asking protection through the dangers of night. In medieval belief, darkness was more than lack of light. It was a time of demons, illness, and thieves. To sleep was to surrender control. A whispered paternoster or Ave Maria served as protection as vital as blankets and curtains. One final detail appears in household rules. Candles were to burn before icons or crucifixes while the monarch slept. Light, prayer, and ritual stood guard as the ruler closed their eyes, hoping to pass the long winter night in uneasy peace. Imagine a soft golden glow falling over painted saints, their eyes watching through the night, comforting to some, unsettling to others. You can almost sense their presence in the darkness, a quiet reminder that even kings and queens rested beneath powers greater than themselves. An interesting custom appears in certain chronicles. Some monarchs traced the sign of the cross on their pillows before lying down. Others sprinkled holy water over the bed curtains. These acts may seem simple today, but at the time they were believed to offer real protection against sudden death, troubling dreams, or malevolent forces. Scholars still debate whether such practices were widespread or simply personal expressions of devotion. What is clear is that religion shaped even the act of sleeping. There were practical concerns as well. Evening prayers often asked for health and fertility. A queen hoping for an heir might drift off while repeating appeals to saints linked with childbirth. A king preparing for war might fall asleep after quietly reciting a psalm for strength or success. Night was more than rest. It was a form of preparation for the responsibilities of the coming day. One unusual practice noted in France involved reading parts of the Book of Hours aloud in bed until sleep arrived. Picture lying beneath thick quilts, lips moving gently, devotional words mixing with the soft crackle of the hearth until they faded into the murmurs of sleep. In this way, prayer itself became a lullaby. Modern researchers still question whether these nightly rituals truly soothed monarchs or simply reflected a culture shaped by fear. Were these prayers deeply felt, or were they performed out of duty under the watchful eyes of attendants? We cannot say for certain. What we do know is that sleep for royalty was rarely private. Faith followed them into the bedchamber as surely as fur blankets or firelight. Now pause and imagine the scene. The monarch reclines, head settling into embroidered pillows. A servant kneels near the foot of the bed, offering a final blessing. Curtains sway as they are drawn tight, sealing in warmth along with whispered prayers. Outside, the wind groans against stone walls. Inside, the night has been marked by ritual. When sleep arrives, it is not only physical. It is spiritual, guarded by words spoken into the dark. The fire dims. The prayers fall silent. Yet the night itself remains uneasy. In these hours, shadows seem to move with purpose. You picture yourself beneath heavy curtains, hearing the wind scratch at shutters, wondering if something unseen waits beyond the darkness. For monarchs, superstition filled every breath of night air. Winter was not only cold, it felt haunted. Chronicles describe nobles who feared spirits or demons roaming after dark. Dreams were thought to be gateways through which such forces could pass. To sleep was to lower one's defenses, and so charms, prayers, and relics were kept close at hand. A queen might hide a saint's medal beneath her pillow. A king might place a holy relic beside the bed. These were not decorations. They were defenses against the unknown. There are even reports of charms sewn directly into bed curtains, stitched with protective symbols. Imagine tracing those hidden threads as sleep approached, trusting them to keep harm away. Such habits blur the line between religious practice and folk belief, between formal ritual and quiet superstition. Historians disagree on how common these ideas were among the elite, but court records hint at them repeatedly. One curious detail survives in stories of monarchs keeping animals near their chambers for protection. Cats, for example, were believed by some to sense spirits and drive away misfortune. Whether they truly wandered royal bedchambers is uncertain, but the idea remains: small guardians against unseen threats. Dogs, already valued as warm footrests, may also have served as watchful companions against night fears. And then there were the dreams. Heavy meals, spiced wine, and smoky air often produced vivid and unsettling visions. A nightmare was never just a bad dream. It might be taken as a warning or a sign of things to come. You imagine the monarch waking suddenly, heart pounding, disturbing images lingering in the mind. Attendants would hurry in to calm them, offering holy water and reassurance that evil could not cross the sacred curtains. Still, the fear often lingered, sharper than the cold itself. Modern scholars continue to debate how literally medieval rulers believed in these night terrors. Some argue that superstition ran deep, and that monarchs relied on charms out of genuine fear. Others suggest the rituals were symbolic, public signs of devotion, while private anxieties were shaped more by politics and responsibility. Both views may hold truth. Power often brings suspicion, and the night allowed such worries to grow. Now imagine lying there, trying to give in to sleep while listening for sounds beyond the curtains. Every creak in the timber feels threatening. Every gust of wind seems like a whisper. The castle itself appears restless. You pull the covers closer, not only against the cold, but against the weight of fear. For a medieval monarch, ruling a kingdom did not remove vulnerability. Darkness carried meaning, danger, and mystery. Night after night, kings and queens lived with this mixture of belief and unease, warmth and chill, ritual and uncertainty. Cold was one enemy, but imagination was another. Wrapped in furs, scented with herbs, protected by relics, they searched for peace. Sometimes they found it. Sometimes the night remained unsettled long after the candles were extinguished. The long night rarely passed without interruption. Sleep was often broken. In the Middle Ages, people spoke of a first sleep and a second sleep, with a waking period in between. During this pause, dreams were remembered, prayers were whispered, or quiet activities were done. You sit up in the darkness now, heavy curtains around you, aware of the strange calm of that midnight interval. Medical texts and court diaries confirm that segmented sleep was common. In cold chambers, the first stretch of sleep lasted a few hours, ending as the fire burned low and the chill returned. Monarchs might wake to drink warm ale or spiced wine, to pray, or simply to think. After this pause, they returned to bed for a second period of sleep, rising at dawn. A revealing account from a 15th-century French physician described this interval as ideal for reflection or intimacy. For rulers, it was often a time for planning. Picture a king, half awake, quietly discussing strategy with trusted advisors standing in the shadows. In these moments, the bedchamber became both sleeping space and council room. Interestingly, some writers praise this pattern as healthier than uninterrupted sleep, claiming it matched the body's natural rhythms. Others warned against it, arguing that waking at night invited sadness or harmful spirits. Even experts disagreed. What remains clear is that kings and queens shared the same restless nights as their subjects, though they surrounded those experiences with ceremony and meaning. During this waking interval, monarchs might also read or listen to scripture read aloud by attendants. You can almost hear the soft rhythm of psalms drifting through the curtains, candlelight reflecting off the gold leaf of a manuscript page. Faith and fatigue blended together, creating a space where both body and soul felt exposed. There are hints of even more unusual practices. In some courts, physicians advised gentle movement, stretching limbs or pacing briefly, to aid digestion before returning to bed. These small acts reveal how carefully sleep was managed, even in the quietest hours of the night. Picture the unusual image of a queen in a heavy nightgown and fur-lined cap pacing slowly around her chamber, servants following with lanterns as snow taps against the shutters. It feels strange, yet familiar. Who has not wandered awake during the night? Returning to bed was like crossing a boundary once more. Curtains were pulled closed, embers stirred, sacred objects touched for comfort. The second period of sleep often came more easily, with deeper rest and fuller dreams, until the faint glow of dawn slipped through the shutters. You settle back into that rhythm now, realizing that rest in a medieval castle did not move in a straight line, but in cycles. 2 steps forward, a pause, then forward again. In this way, it becomes clear that even kings and queens wrapped in silk and guarded by soldiers experienced the same broken nights as common villagers. Authority did not promise uninterrupted sleep. It only framed waking hours with ceremony, advice, and quiet faith. The silence of that nighttime pause lifts your thoughts upward, beyond stone walls and curtains, toward the sky itself. For medieval rulers, sleep was shaped not only by cold and habit, but also by the stars. Astrology wove through royal life, and rest was no exception. Court astrologers advised when to lie down, when to rise, and even how a bed should be positioned. The idea may seem curious. Leaders who commanded armies still deferred to planetary alignment before closing their eyes. Records from royal courts in England, France, and the Holy Roman Empire mention astrologers drawing charts and recommending favorable hours for rest. It sounds lavish, yet it reflected a firm belief that the heavens influenced health, emotions, and dreams. A king might delay sleep if the signs were unfavorable, or be urged to rise early when Venus was well placed. Sleep became a negotiation, not only with hunger and cold, but with the sky above. One unusual story survives about Catherine de' Medici, who reportedly kept astrologers nearby and consulted them on daily routines, including rest. Whether she truly believed her dreams were shaped by Jupiter's position, or whether it offered psychological comfort during unstable times, remains debated. Historians still disagree on whether rulers fully trusted such advice or used it to reinforce authority and mystery. Another curious detail involves bed placement. Some medical astrological texts recommended sleeping with the head facing east, aligned with the rising sun and renewal. Others favored the south for warmth. Imagine servants dragging a massive royal bed across rush-covered floors to satisfy an astrologer's calculations. It may sound excessive now, but in that era, the cosmos occupied the bedchamber as surely as the hearth fire. Dreams also entered this discussion. Astrologers claimed to interpret royal dreams through planetary motion. A disturbing vision after a heavy meal might be blamed on Saturn's influence rather than digestion. A pleasant dream of light and abundance could be credited to Venus. Sleep became a stage for celestial interpretation, with monarchs both observing and participating. Yet beneath these grand ideas, the experience remained deeply human. You can imagine the queen shifting restlessly regardless of the stars, pulling furs tighter as drafts crept through shutters that cared nothing for constellations. Still, belief offered comfort. To think the night followed a cosmic order imposed meaning on the cold and dark. Modern historians continue to examine this blend of observation, belief, and ritual. Was it sincere faith, or performance meant to impress courtiers by suggesting that even royal sleep carried cosmic importance? Perhaps it was both. In winters that stripped power to its core, belief in the stars offered another layer of protection. You lie back now, imagining the night sky glittering unseen beyond the castle walls. Inside the curtains, the monarch sleeps beneath layers of fur and silk. Outside, the heavens turn, indifferent yet meaningful to those who believed their fate was written among them. The stars may not bring warmth, but they seem to watch silently, guiding each breath until dawn. The candles have burned low. Embers barely glow, and the chamber holds a sharp chill. You shift beneath the covers and notice your own breath rising in pale clouds. Imagine being a monarch wrapped in velvet and fur, yet waking to see vapor drift before your face like smoke. Cold has slipped past the defenses of curtains, reminding you that warmth here is always uncertain. Contemporary records describe frost forming inside royal chambers during extreme winters. Servants noted mornings when bed hangings stiffened with rime, or when water froze solid in basins overnight. In 1407, a French court chronicler recorded ice forming on a king's coverlet as he slept. These accounts show that the battle against winter was not symbolic. It was constant, physical, and unavoidable. Small details appear in letters as well. Courtiers sometimes joked about writing names in frost on windows or bedposts. Picture a half-frozen noble tracing shapes at dawn while waiting for fires to be lit. Even in discomfort, people found moments of humor. Experts disagree on how common such extremes were. Some argue they occurred only during severe winters, while others believe they were routine in Northern Europe's stone castles. The reality likely falls between cold enough to disturb rulers at night, though not always. What is clear is that seeing one's breath and feeling frost on pillows was not unusual for monarchs. The sensation must have been jarring. You lift the quilt and the air cuts sharply. A queen might press deeper into furs, complaining about drafts. A king might call for servants to feed the fire or bring more coverings. Their frustration is easy to imagine. Rulers of realms, yet powerless over the temperature of their own chamber. Stories tell of monarchs discovering frozen ink in wells or bread stiff with ice on tables. These moments underline the persistence of cold. Castles defended against enemies, not weather. Winter entered as surely as breath fills lungs. And lying beneath the curtains, you feel that same exposure. Each exhale clouds the dark. The bedding is heavy, the caps snug, the socks thick, yet nothing fully shields you from the stone shell open to the sky's icy reach. Sleep becomes uncertain. How do you rest when the air itself feels hostile? Perhaps you pull a dog closer for warmth. Perhaps you whisper another prayer, half dreaming, hoping dawn arrives quickly. Or perhaps you simply endure, waiting for fatigue to overcome discomfort. Monarchs did the same. They woke, they shivered, they complained, and they endured. So you close your eyes, frost glinting faintly along the curtain's edge, breath rising like pale signals in the dark. You understand now that for kings and queens, winter nights were not defined by wealth or command, but by endurance. They slept, yes, but always with the knowledge that even rulers could not escape winter's breath curling through their most private space. The frost clings to the air. But imagine the monarch is nowhere near their usual chamber. Castles were not permanent homes. Kings and queens traveled constantly, moving entire households along muddy roads and frozen fields. Alongside them went one of the most unusual luxuries of power, the traveling bed. Royal itineraries suggest that beds were treated almost like thrones, symbols of authority as well as tools for survival. When a ruler moved between fortresses, monasteries, or manors, carpenters dismantled the bed frame, packed its panels and posts, and transported them by cart. Curtains, quilts, and pillows were stowed in trunks. Wherever the monarch stopped, servants reassembled the bed as if erecting a portable palace. Imagine stepping into a cold, drafty hall and finding the familiar canopy waiting, like a fragment of home transplanted onto foreign stone. One intriguing detail from household ordinances describes this process almost ceremoniously. The king's bed was to be set up first in any new residence, before kitchens were arranged or councils convened. Comfort, or at least a sense of continuity, mattered as much as governance. Even monarchs dreaded the shock of a cold, unfamiliar mattress. Scholars debate whether these traveling beds were truly practical for warmth or mostly symbolic. Some argue that familiarity itself provided comfort, reducing the stress of constant travel. Others suggest the real advantage was privacy, as the bed's curtains created a predictable cocoon in unfamiliar halls. Either way, the sight of servants reassembling a royal bed wherever the ruler paused illustrates the curious mix of fragility and grandeur at the heart of kingship. One eccentric tale tells of Henry VIII insisting his portable bed accompany him on hunting trips so he could rest beneath embroidered hangings, even in a rustic lodge. Picture the oddity: muddy boots, barking dogs, rough wooden walls, and in the corner, a towering four-poster with crimson curtains. A monarch's sleep, however impractical, could not be left to chance. And yet the cold followed everywhere. Whether in Windsor, Rouen, or an abbey guesthouse, winter crept through shutters just the same. Familiar curtains helped. Layered quilts helped. But frost still formed on glass, and breath still hung in the air. Comfort was portable, but only partially. The body still shivered, no matter how carefully the bed was rebuilt. Imagine marching alongside the royal procession, watching servants unload timber and fabric, assembling the heavy bed again and again. The task was exhausting but essential. At night, when the monarch lay down, the continuity of the bed reassured them. You are still sovereign, even in exile, even in winter. The traveling bed became more than furniture. It was a moving fortress against the night, a symbol of identity carried across kingdoms. Inside, kings and queens curled beneath furs, whispering prayers, watching frost form at the edges. Outside, the world changed with every mile, but inside, for a few hours, permanence could be feigned. Now consider the peasants outside. Despite their suffering, monarchs endured the cold more comfortably than the villagers who served them. The contrast sharpens perspective. While the ruler lay beneath layers of fur, peasants often slept on straw pallets near a hearth, packed together for warmth. Contemporary records show families sometimes shared space with livestock, drawing heat from cows or sheep. In the castle, the monarch complained of drafts despite squirrel furs. The irony is striking: royalty, surrounded by wealth, yet never fully insulated. Peasants, though poor, survived warmth in ways the elite might never admit. Some memorial rolls recount villagers taking turns by the fire, rotating positions to share the warmth. Imagine the shuffle of bodies in the dark, quiet negotiations over who got the warmest spot. Compare this with a monarch drawing curtains around their private furnace of bedding. Both struggled with the same cold, one in velvet, the other in smoke and sweat. Researchers debate whether royals were truly warmer than peasants in winter. Monarchs had bedding and servants to tend fires, but large stone halls were difficult to heat. Peasants, despite poverty, often stayed warmer in small, low-ceilinged huts. Comfort, it seems, was not guaranteed by wealth. Villagers sometimes slept in shifts, keeping the fire alive for the group, a cooperative rhythm contrasting with the monarch's dependence on attendance. Kings rang for coals. Peasants simply rose to feed the fire themselves. Both faced interruptions, but one endured them publicly, the other within family bonds. From the monarch's perspective, perhaps they lay awake listening to the storm, wondering about subjects in their huts. Did empathy stir, or were such thoughts absent behind the royal cocoon? Chronicles are silent, but imagination fills the gap. Power bought layers, not immunity. The cold affected all. When kings and queens complained of icy pillows and frost on curtains, their discomfort was real yet relative. Outside, peasants shivered, sometimes without quilts, sometimes relying on children for warmth. Inside, monarchs cursed drafts that slipped past velvet hangings. Both endured nights that felt endless, waking stiff at dawn. The cold spared no one, only disguised itself differently, scratchy straw for the villager, silken quilts for the monarch. Winter rendered every sleeper alike, huddled, anxious, waiting for sun and warmth. The hush of the bedchamber conceals another presence, the night guards. Even as kings and queens rested, men in armor patrolled the halls, breath fogging the cold air. You can almost hear the clank of mail, the muffled thud of boots, the murmured exchanges between watchmen. Sleep in a medieval castle was never fully private. English and Burgundian court records show guards on shift throughout winter nights. Their duties included keeping threats at bay, tending fires, checking shutters, and ensuring no accidents endangered the sovereign. Imagine a queen, comforted by distant footsteps, knowing someone circled the castle while she drowsed behind her curtains. Yet there's a twist. Some chronicles note guards calling out the hour as they patrolled, announcing, "All is well." Meant to reassure, it may have occasionally annoyed a monarch trying to sleep beneath heavy quilts. Still, vigilance, however intrusive, was preferable to silence, which could signal negligence, or worse, danger. Specialists still debate how close guards actually stood to the royal chamber. Some insist watchmen were stationed right outside the door, spears ready to stop any intruder. Others argue that guards stayed further away, respecting the sanctity of the monarch's rest. Security was far from perfect. Accounts exist of assassins scaling walls or conspirators sneaking into chambers despite vigilant guards. One French king even ordered extra locks on his bed curtains, fearing betrayal from his own attendants. Picture a monarch cloaked in furs, fastening cords across velvet as if hiding from his household, fear, like cold, creeping beneath the door. Return now to your imagined bed. You hear guards' boots scraping stone, the occasional bark, a shouted hour. These sounds mix with the wind and the creak of wood, creating a tapestry of vigilance and unease. Royalty rested on embroidered pillows, yet sleep was never solitary. It was watched, guarded, and surrounded by the footsteps of others pacing through the night. The steps fade, and in the following hush, sleep returns, briefly. Dreams soon take over. For medieval monarchs, dreams were not idle fantasies but messages, warnings, or glimpses of destiny. Imagine a king waking in a sweat, convinced the flickering images of sleep carried meaning for his realm. Chronicles and letters reveal how seriously rulers regarded these visions. Some dreams were recorded by scribes the next morning, preserved alongside accounts of battles and treaties. A dream could signify divine favor or forewarn disaster. Kings and queens treated these nocturnal visions as dispatches from heaven. One account tells of Henry I of England, who reportedly dreamed of his ship sinking just before the White Ship disaster claimed his heir. Coincidence or prophecy, We cannot know, but contemporaries believed the night whispered truths hidden in daylight. Court astrologers or confessors often interpreted these dreams, linking a vision of wolves to rebellion or fields to peace and fertility. Even nightmares drew intense scrutiny. A queen describing a shadowy figure could be warned of betrayal within her household. In courts rife with intrigue, trust could shatter after a single restless night. Scholars debate the actual influence of dreams on political decisions. Some suggest rulers used visions as rhetorical tools to justify pre-made choices, while others believe medieval piety made them genuine sources of guidance. Regardless, the images of the night often shaped strategies of the day. Humor, too, had its place. One eccentric story recounts a noble teasing a king for dreaming of geese, interpreting it as indigestion from supper. Yet for a monarch lying awake afterward, the effect could be unsettling. Picture the silent chamber, drafts whistling through shutters, and the racing heart of a ruler convinced heaven had spoken. Sleep afterward was shallow, haunted by vivid visions. You lie there now with them, heavy bedding pressing on your chest, candlelight tracing the edges of curtains. Fragments of dreams linger, a ship on stormy seas, a shadow at the door, a voice calling your name. Do they matter, or are they just the residue of wine and venison? In the medieval mind, meaning was unavoidable. Every dream was a potential prophecy, each night, destiny whispering in your ear. Yet cold required practical solutions. Imagine an attendant placing a wooden tray nearby, holding a goblet of steaming herbal drink. Monarchs relied not only on bedding but on potions to help them sleep through winter nights. Royal household accounts mention honey drinks mixed with poppy, chamomile, or valerian, believed to calm nerves, aid digestion, and encourage drowsiness. You lift the cup in your mind and sip, the warmth and honey co-likely. The arrangement depended on the ruler's temperament. A paranoid king might demand soldiers at his bedside, while a more relaxed sovereign would send them to patrol the outer halls. One curious story survives of guards warming themselves with mulled ale during long shifts, their voices growing louder as drinks softened the cold. Imagine faint laughter drifting upward, breaking the quiet of a winter castle night. Perhaps the king stirred, either annoyed or amused. After all, even soldiers needed comfort during dark, endless nights. Animals also played a role in nightly security. Large hounds lay in doorways, serving as both alarm and deterrent. Their low growls or sudden barks punctuated the silence, startling sleepers but also offering reassurance that no threat went unnoticed. You can hear it now, a mastiff's deep bark echoes across the courtyard, followed by a silence made sharper by the interruption fording, the herbs faintly bitter. Sleep feels closer, though not guaranteed. Some recipes included saffron, prized for color, flavor, and its supposed power to cheer the heart. Imagine a monarch clutching a golden-hued potion, hoping it would banish both melancholy and cold, a blend of medicine and luxury. Experts debate the effectiveness of these remedies. Some suggest mild sedative properties, others that their power was psychological. Either way, the ritual mattered. Drinking a prepared potion before bed was a reassurance, a small act of care. Not all solutions were gentle. Physicians sometimes prescribed stronger drinks, wine fortified with opiates or spiced narcotics. Picture the uneasy balance between relief and danger. Attendants praying the slumber would be restorative, not fatal. The line between cure and poison haunted medieval medicine. Some remedies were burned, not sipped. Herbs tossed onto coals produced smoke intended to purify the air. You catch the scent of sage or rosemary curling into your nostrils, eyes stinging slightly. Scholars still debate whether fumigations truly helped or were primarily ritual gestures. Comfort foods, too, warm ale with milk, thick broths, soothed the stomach when winter meals were irregular. Full bellies often brought better sleep. You set down the goblet, lie back, warmth spreading through your chest, bitterness settling in your stomach. You sense the mixture of faith, science, and hope surrounding these nightly remedies. Nothing guaranteed sleep in a frozen castle, but every sip, every scent, was proof that someone had tried. Monarchs who led armies still relied on fragile comforts, cups of honeyed herbs, pouches of saffron, or the smoke of rosemary curling through the night. You close your eyes with them now, the draft softening your breath, the cold pressing at the edges, yet sleep feels a little nearer. You stir in drowsiness, and for a moment it seems as if the cold itself has crept beneath the curtains. Then you realize it is not imagination. Snow has found its way inside. Even the thick walls of castles could not always block the harshest winters. Servants recorded mornings when thin drifts collected on window ledges, or when flakes blew through cracks in shutters and arrow slits, dusting floors with white. Imagine waking to frost sparkling on your quilt, delicate, yet unforgiving. Surviving letters and chronicles describe these scenes without exaggeration. A Scottish courtier once wrote of snow clinging to bed curtains, shaken loose when the wind howled strongest. If kings and queens were startled, their attendants were too, rushing to sweep away the icy intrusion before it melted into dampness. Some chambers had extra wooden boards pressed against shutters in deep winter, almost like makeshift barricades against the storm. Yet the wind was clever, slipping flakes through the tiniest gaps, swirling them into rooms as if to remind royalty of nature's dominion. Imagine lying half asleep, feeling a cold flake land on your cheek, the shock sharper than any nightmare. Historians remain unsure how common this intrusion was. Some argue it affected only northern castles, while others suggest that in especially brutal seasons, even southern courts were not spared. The lack of consistent records leaves the question open. But the anecdotes that remain paint vivid pictures of monarchs humbled by snow beneath their own roofs. A peculiar German account tells of servants lighting extra torches and braziers when snow piled inside a hall, forming miniature drifts that had to be shoveled out. You can almost hear their laughter mixed with exasperation, as if the castle itself were participating in the storm. For the monarch under the covers, however, it was no joke. The dampness that followed was far worse than the flakes themselves. Wet quilts chilled the body faster than dry cold, and illness waited in every shiver. Servants hurried to replace bedding and dry furs by the fire, while the ruler clung to scraps of warmth. Picture yourself now, tucked inside, hearing shutters rattle as the blizzard roars. The curtains sway slightly with each gust, and a snowflake tickles your hand, melting instantly on your skin. You pull the covers tighter, but the reminder is sharp: no curtain, wall, or bed can keep winter fully at bay. The monarch endured. They drew furs close, called for more blankets, perhaps whispered a prayer for dawn, and in these moments, stripped of ceremony, they were as vulnerable as any peasant startled by snow drifting into a humble hut. Snow swept away and curtains secured, yet the bed was more than a place of sleep. For monarchs, it was also a stage for intimacy, sometimes tender, sometimes strategic. Beneath the canopy, heirs were conceived, alliances reinforced, and affections shared. Warmth from another body was as effective against the cold as any fur. Records show kings and queens did not always sleep apart, contrary to later practices. Shared beds were visible signs of unity, both personal and political. When the queen joined the king under the quilts, the court understood its significance. Heirs could be in the making, or reconciliation after disputes might be underway. Sharing a bed went far beyond private comfort. It was observed, whispered about, and recorded. In France, for example, attendants noted which nights the royal couple retired together. Such details were matters of state, carefully marked like the movement of armies. The bed was both cradle of lineage and ledger of duty. Intimacy was not always marital. Favorites, mistresses, or companions sometimes occupied the royal bed. Sharing warmth could be political, a privilege signaling favor and influence. A noble spending the night near the king might gain advantage by morning. Scholars debate how frequent these arrangements were, but the bed remained a place where politics and flesh intertwined. There were lighter, more human moments. Letters hint at monarchs grumbling about cold feet, nudging partners closer, or hogging blankets. Imagine Henry VII greedily drawing furs toward himself, while a queen laughed softly as her hands warmed against his side. In these moments, titles faded. Monarchs were simply people craving warmth and closeness. Risks existed. Intimacy could spark scandal, rumors, or jealousy. The royal bed was never fully private. Servants prepared it, guards stood nearby, and attendants often lingered in adjoining rooms. Even passion was performed. Monarchs might whisper sweet words, knowing others would gossip by morning. A Spanish account describes couples drinking spiced wine before bed, believed to create warmth and fertility. Whether effective or not, the ritual fostered intimacy, blending comfort with expectation. Picture goblets gleaming in firelight, liquid thick with cinnamon before curtains closed. Now, beneath imagined furs, you sense the paradox. The bed was private yet public, intimate yet political. Love might bloom, alliances be sealed, yet always against cold stone walls and watchful eyes. For kings and queens, warmth in another's arms carried weight beyond the personal. It was history unfolding under quilts. As closeness faded, winter's dangers returned. The cold chamber was not only uncomfortable but hazardous. Imagine waking in the dark, breath wheezing, chest tight, chill clinging to your lungs. In an age without antibiotics, a simple cough could become fever, fever could become tragedy. Household physicians blamed bad airs seeping in during sleep. They warned against drafts through shutters or damp bedding. Monarchs were advised to keep heads covered, drink warming tonics, and avoid walls heavy with frost. Yet, even with precautions, accounts abound of colds, chills, and winter fevers in royal chambers. Henry VIII, for example, kept fires stoked high, fearing ailments cold might provoke. His paranoia reflected reality. Long winters brought influenza and pneumonia outbreaks. A ruler could command armies but not his own lungs. Some medical accounts detail leeches or cupping glasses applied at night, even in bed, to balance humors. Imagine lying beneath heavy quilts, weak with fever, while attendants fussed with bloodletting bowls and herbs meant to restore health. Sleep must have been restless, tangled with illness and treatment. Scholars continue to debate whether it was the cold itself that caused illness in medieval monarchs, or if it was the crowded, smoky chambers that worsened conditions. Some point to damp air as the true culprit, while others insist poor hygiene made infection inevitable. Regardless of the cause, nights for kings and queens were often interrupted by coughing fits, headaches, and clammy sweats. The sounds of illness filled the chamber. You can almost hear the hacking coughs bouncing off stone, the rustle of attendants fetching water, the snap of logs thrown onto the fire. For courtiers nearby, it was a stark reminder, even the sovereign was mortal, vulnerable to the same chills that afflicted their subjects. One curious remedy for sleepless monarchs was heated wine infused with cloves and pepper, which burned the throat but was believed to chase out cold from within. Less pleasant treatments included mustard or onion poultices applied hot to the chest, a sharp sting endured in hope of even a few hours of rest. Beneath imagined furs, you sense the fragility of royal bodies. Despite crowns and armies, winter pressed relentlessly, spreading sickness no wealth could fully protect against. Monarchs suffered as their people did, shivering, sweating, coughing through the night, relying only on attendants with remedies rather than any immunity. So when imagining royal sleep, think not of serene faces in gilded chambers, but of nights broken by coughing, bedding damp with fever, and whispered prayers over a ruler no stronger than any village child. The cold spared no one. The coughing might fade, but winter continued its slow siege, pressing against the castle itself. The architecture was designed for defense, not comfort, forcing nobles to improvise ways to soften the stone. Tapestries became the first line of protection, large swathes of wool and silk covering bare walls. Inventories list dozens, sometimes hundreds, rotated seasonally, with the heaviest sets reserved for winter. Touch one and you feel its scratchy warmth, thick enough to muffle sound. They depicted saints, hunts, or battles, yet their true victory was insulation. In some accounts, tapestries were hung across doorways as well, creating muffled corridors. This made the castle cozy but also slightly claustrophobic, as if it shrank in response to winter's bite. Scholars debate how effective these measures were. Some argue that tapestries, carpets, and rushes genuinely raised room temperatures, while others suggest they merely softened drafts, leaving rooms cold but marginally bearable. Either way, monarchs spent fortunes on textiles that blurred the line between art and practicality. Furniture joined the battle against winter, often draped with covers to provide additional warmth. Special bed tents sometimes enclosed chambers, forming small fabric fortresses within the stone walls. Imagine a king retreating each night into a private sanctuary, insulated against the surrounding cold. Other tactics were more eccentric. Windows might be stuffed with wool or reeds, shutters draped with animal skins, a crude but effective insulation that dimmed rooms. Floor coverings mattered too. Rushes were scattered across stone floors, while imported carpets became prized winter luxuries. Stepping from bed onto woven wool rather than bare stone could make the difference between a gasp and a tolerable start to the day. Yet, for all these precautions, the cold often won. Frost still crept across glass, and each breath hung in the air. The castle resisted only so much, the rest had to be endured. Even surrounded by luxury, monarchs lived in houses that constantly reminded them of nature's power. Royal sleep was never silent. Dogs stirred restlessly at the foot of the bed, claws scraping on stone, occasional barks echoing down corridors. Cats prowled, hunting rats among the rushes and scraps. Servants remained in adjoining rooms, ready to answer calls for logs or warm drinks, their whispers a constant reminder of the bedchamber's lack of privacy. Household records note grooms whose duty was to stay within earshot all night. Imagine drifting off while hearing someone stoke the fire just yards away. Church bells added another layer, marking canonical hours. Monks rose for midnight prayers, chants drifting through stone, low and resonant. Later centuries added clocks, mechanical contraptions that chimed with jarring precision. Scholars debate whether this constant background noise lulled monarchs or contributed to insomnia. Either way, silence was rare. The castle remained alive even when its ruler tried to rest. Weather added yet more complexity. Wind groaned through beams, shutters banged loose, rain pounded leaded glass, and thunder echoed through halls, amplified by stone. Lightning cast sudden shadows, startling even experienced rulers. Letters recount the almost comic nuisance of frogs croaking in castle moats, audible through thick walls. Through it all, the soundscape of royal sleep was layered and inescapable. Dogs, servants, bells, wind, and even frogs intruded on the fragile calm of the canopy. You realize that true silence belonged to no one, not even kings and queens. They closed their eyes, surrounded by a chorus they could not command, lulled or disturbed by the constant pulse of life within their castle. The chamber hummed with sounds, yet often the greatest disturbances came from within. Monarchs were as human as any villager, and many struggled with sleeplessness. Chroniclers recorded tales of rulers pacing their halls at night, haunted by thoughts or tormented by unrest. These stories lingered in memory, shaping images of kings and queens who could not find peace, even beneath mountains of quilts. One account tells of Charles VI of France, plagued by insomnia during his troubled reign. He wandered the palace at night, muttering to himself, attended by servants carrying candles, whether from illness, anxiety, or superstition. The result was the same, long, restless nights where rest seemed distant. His sleeplessness was not merely personal but political, feeding worries about the stability of the crown. A similar tale comes from England. Richard III, later vilified by Shakespeare, reportedly slept poorly, tormented by dreams of betrayal. Chronicles suggest his restlessness worsened in winter, when the cold pressed hardest. Was it guilt, paranoia, or simply the discomfort of icy stone chambers? Historians cannot say for certain. Yet the image of a restless king tossing beneath embroidered curtains endures. Queens too were troubled by sleepless nights. Catherine of Aragon, during her years in exile in chilly English manors, reportedly spent nights in prayer rather than sleep. Wrapped in coarse blankets instead of royal furs, she sought comfort through devotion rather than warmth. Sleep became less about restoration and more about endurance. Today, researchers debate whether these accounts reflect real insomnia or serve as metaphors. Some suggest tales of sleepless monarchs symbolized troubled reigns, restlessness as a sign of instability. Others argue that the harsh conditions of medieval castles made real rest difficult. Drafts, noise, illness, and heavy meals all conspired to rob even the most powerful of sleep. One eccentric anecdote claims a French king blamed his insomnia on mischievous servants hiding live birds in the rafters, their fluttering wings waking him at odd hours. True or not, the story illustrates how fragile the boundary was between comfort and disruption. Now imagine lying awake with them, staring into a dark canopy, hearing the wind outside and the quiet snores of companions nearby. The mind, already burdened with responsibility, spins faster in the still hours. Doubts grow louder, fears sharper. In those moments, crowns mean nothing. You are simply another human struggling to quiet thoughts long enough to drift away. Legends of sleepless monarchs show that winter nights were as much psychological battles as physical ones. Cold, noise, and duty pressed together, making rest elusive. When kings and queens failed to sleep, the whole realm seemed to tremble with them. At last, the long night yields to a faint gray glow creeping through the shutters. You sense it before you see it, a softening of darkness, a promise that morning has broken winter's grip. The monarch stirs beneath quilts, joints stiff, limbs heavy, grateful for the relief of light. No matter how restless the night, haunted by cold, noise, dreams, or illness, dawn always carried a sense of survival. Royal mornings began with ritual. Servants entered quietly, carrying metal basins of warm water. The splash echoed as it poured, steam rising briefly before fading. Imagine dipping your hands into it, icy by modern standards, but blissfully warm to someone who had slept in a freezing chamber. The sting awakened bloodless fingers, reminding the monarch that the body was alive, still capable of movement after the long assault of night. Records describe the careful process of dressing. Layers of linen, wool, and fur were worn with the help of attendants. Each garment acted as armor against lingering cold. A heavy cloak went on last, thrown around shoulders, as the monarch sat on the bed's edge, yawning, sometimes sneezing. Even kings and queens began the day with blurry eyes and stiff muscles. Some courts had the custom of offering spiced wine or broth immediately upon waking, thought to warm the stomach and prepare the body for the day. Picture the monarch sipping slowly, still half asleep, cinnamon or clove replacing the bitterness of night air. For a brief moment, the chamber felt less hostile. Historians debate whether mornings were truly invigorating or simply another ordeal. Some believe monarchs rose with triumph, having endured the night. Others argue they emerged exhausted, their health worn down by chronic cold and restlessness. The truth likely lies somewhere in between, resilience mixed with fatigue, masked by ceremony. One vivid image remains, attendants brushing frost off bed curtains, shaking them as if they were snowy cloaks. Imagine servants scurrying with cloths, wiping moisture from windows, while the monarch muttered about the hardships of kingship. These were the mundane beginnings of days that might end in councils, battles, or banquets. Power always started with the simplest human acts, rising stiff from bed, splashing water on the face, bracing against the chill. Now step into that dawn with them. Candles gutter out, wax dripping into silence. Curtains part, light spills across quilts rumpled from tossing. You rise slowly, legs trembling, but relief floods you. The worst is over. Another winter's night has been endured. The day ahead will bring trials, but for now, you simply breathe, grateful for returning warmth. So you have walked through the long winter nights of kings and queens, sharing their stone and frost-bound chambers, heavy curtains, and crowded beds. You have felt the sting of drafts, smelled tallow and herbs, and heard the restless chorus of guards, dogs, and wind. You have seen that crowns could not command warmth. Every comfort was improvised, fragile, fleeting. Let your mind now drift. Picture the chamber as a quiet sanctuary. The fire glows low but steady, softening the stone walls. Curtains sway gently. Castle sounds fade into the distance, becoming nothing more than a hush. Imagine the monarch sinking into genuine rest. Body heavy, mind quiet, fears, politics, and cold dissolve with each breath. The bed, once a fortress, becomes a cradle of stillness. You share that cradle now, feeling the weight of blankets as comfort, grounding you. Outside, frost glitters on battlements, untouched by warmth within. The world is frozen, but you are safe. Dawn will return with noise, duty, and demands, but for now there is only calm. The night stretches softly, endlessly, inviting you to let go. Close your eyes, release the chill, and drift gently into sleep. Sweet dreams until morning comes.